As of the end of February, I have completed 11 books towards my 50 books challenge, which sounds impressive based on my last video, but it's only because I did end up counting the two Wallace Stevens poetry collections. So I ended up with 5 in January, counting those 2 extra books, and so that means I read 6 books in February. Once again, 2 of those books were poetry, both of which were for my Caribbean Women's Literature class. The first one was called The Fat Black Woman's Poems by Grace Nichols, and the second one was called Lady in a Boat by Merle Collins, both of which I found very enjoyable. They're very, very, very different books of poetry. The Grace Nichols is probably the most relatable one out of the 2. It's like a very candid account of what it's like to live in England, having been from the Caribbean, and it's really fascinating and really good. And there's just the funniest moments in it, and like the most heartbreaking ones as well. I just thought it was an excellent collection of poetry. The Merle Collins is a bit more political, which doesn't make it bad. I enjoyed it quite a lot as well. It's a lot about Grenada, which is where she is from, and also about the post-colonial experience. So if you enjoy poetry and post-colonial literature, I would definitely point you to both of those books of poetry. I read 2 other books last month for that class as well, one of which was Sirius Blooms at Night by Shani Mutu, which was excellent, excellent. It was basically everything I wanted out of Prospero's Daughter and didn't get from last month. And it was just so good. I really recommend that book. It's a little traumatizing at some points, but I think it's just a very captivating take on all of this stuff that I've been studying, and the way that nature is presented, and there's just all kinds of good stuff in that book. So if you were thinking about reading Prospero's Daughter, I would definitely recommend Sirius Blooms at Night as well instead, maybe, I don't know, one of those. And the second novel that I read for that class, or novella maybe, was Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid. It's really short, so if you maybe want an introduction to all of these post-colonial Caribbean things that I've been talking about, Annie John would be a great place to start. It's also very much about growing up and being a young person, and the relationship between a mother and daughter, and it was just really interesting, and I really enjoyed it from that perspective. The 5th book that I read in February was Hard Times by Charles Dickens, which was again for another class, this time for my Victorian literature class. I've read two other Dickens books, Great Expectations and Martin Chuzzlewit. So Hard Times was my 3rd. It wasn't my favorite, but it was very comforting, because I feel like Dickens just has such a specific style and feel to his books, and so going back and reading that and just being immersed in the Dickensian the miasma of characters was actually comforting in a weird way. I still think Great Expectations is probably my favorite, but Hard Times, it was a little overtly political, and which, I mean, it's Dickens, and I didn't find the characters that enjoyable, and I wasn't quite sure who I was supposed to side with, which is always pretty clear in Dickens, but Dickens's humor and just great, wonderful stuff was all there. So it was enjoyable and was comforting, like I said, but it definitely wasn't my favorite Dickens. But I really love Dickens, so if you're not a fan of Dickens, maybe I wouldn't recommend it, but if you are, or you're not sure, maybe Hard Times would be a good place to start, because it's nice and short. And the 6th book I read in February, and the only book that I read for fun, was Bossy Pants by Tina Fey, which I treated myself to it as a birthday present, and I'm so glad I did, because I've been wanting to read it for forever, because I love Tina Fey, and I love 30 Rock. It's one of my favorite shows. So funny. And I just thought it was really good. It wasn't quite what I was expecting. It was the style was just different than what I was expecting. But Tina Fey is genius and hilarious and wonderful, and her book is really fascinating and really funny. You'll laugh the whole way through it, I promise, especially if you watch 30 Rock, because there's so many good references and anecdotes in the book to 30 Rock. So yeah, I definitely recommend that if you like laughing, because it was very hilarious. So yeah, I tried to talk quickly because I had so many books to talk about this month. If you want to learn more about what I'm reading, you can follow me on Goodreads, or you can check out my WordPress blog. There are links to both of those in the description. Thanks for watching!